Okay, started.
Oh, I better share my screen then. All right, everybody. Well, we are here today with a brand new topic: releasing open source Dataweave libraries. I'm approaching this topic for the Winnipeg MuleSoft Meetup. It's March 2024. If you're watching this in a recorded fashion, and I'm Ryan Haig. Let's do our introductions. The way this meetup's going to go, we have introductions planned. We've already done some like social introductions. So if you joined after I've started sharing my screen, I can't see anymore in the chat, but you guys can see each other's in the chat. And this is it's a meetup. It's not a TED talk, right? So it's nice to know the people I'm here with. We're gonna go through a few. I'm going to put the whole topic together. I'm going to first. There's a thing called Dataweave libraries. I want to make sure we all understand what those are, and then what it has to do with open source software. And then I'm going to get technical and show how you do it. And then at the end, we've got a little time for networking and questions. This wonderful event has been organized by Mana. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, Mana, one of the co-organizers at the meetup here in Winnipeg, and I'm currently a solution architect at EPAM, just specializing in API and integration practices. And I'm a part-time FIFA gamer, so if there's anyone who loves to play FIFA soccer, you can we can cook it out. But yeah, that's it for me. And over to you, Ryan.
Are you talking virtual soccer or are you in the FIFA like you compete?
No, that that would be fun.
That'd be awesome. I do not play virtual or professional football or soccer, although I would be very proud if I did. I've tried to play as a kid, not the virtual. um, yeah, so my name's Ryan Haig. I'm the speaker today. I work for Integration Quest. I think my coffee cup doesn't have too many stains on it. We teach MuleSoft, and we've been just in 2024 launching our first, original curriculum. We have these study groups. So one of you guys, Max, was there with us yesterday. Francis has actually led a study group, so I've got some of my IQ community here with me. IQ is Integration Quest. You like that? Looks like I have a spelling error on the slide, so I'm going to fix that right now. I told you it's the 1.0 of the presentation. There we go, fixed. But yeah, I've been into software a long time, and I care about it being good, and so teaching people how to do it. Now, besides Integration Quest, you can always find me for many years teaching at Trailhead Academy. It used to be called MuleSoft Training. Now it's Trailhead Academy. And I still do that. I'm teaching a Dataweave class on Monday, actually. So, yeah, if anybody's in the public Dataweave class, you can come hang out on Monday at Trailhead Academy. So, if you guys would like to introduce yourselves, that would be cool. Just in the chat, put your name and where you're from, and what you do. And have you been to the Winnipeg MuleSoft Meetup before? I'm a meetup leader. I'm trying to help out Mana here. The community is only as much as you participate. So, have you been here before? If you planning to come again, do you have any ideas for the Winnipeg meetup? Go ahead and put that in the chat. And how else are you involved in the MuleSoft community? You can share that as well. The MuleSoft community really is a thriving way that we help each other be better at software. So I don't see any chats. I actually pulled it up on my other screen, but this is a meetup. Chat as much as you want. You can also chat about the topic. So I suppose I'll get into the topic. Dataweave, the language Dataweave. I am not going to teach you what that is today. That's on Monday at Trailhead Academy. Instead, we're going to talk about a way to reuse Dataweave called library. So a Dataweave library is a binary reusable package with a version, just like in Java, you have jar files that you share like this, and in Node, you have npm modules, and in .NET, you have NuGet. So in lots of different languages, we have ways to reuse code. And in a binary fashion with versions, Dataweave has that too, and it's called a Dataweave library. So if you wanted to reuse a Dataweave library from project to project to project, you can do that through Maven with a Maven dependency. and then Dataweave can access your reusable bit of code, which is going to use the Dataweave type system using an import like that. So step one about having reusable code is just having a mechanism, a technical mechanism that lets you reuse it. So for Dataweave, that makes use of the Maven infrastructure and the Dataweave language features. Cool. I love seeing the chat in there, get to know each other. We're stitching this community together. Maybe I'll see you guys at a future event. I appreciate you doing that. Cool. So that's the context. Like I can make a reusable Dataweave library. Now inside a company, inside a MuleSoft customer, the next step to reuse them is to publish them into Anypoint Exchange, and then anybody else who's a member of your Anypoint organization can reuse it, right? But what if we wanted to share it with each other in the community? So this library on my screen is one that I wanted to share with the community. I didn't want to just share it within my own org, right? So let's talk about this phenomenon called open source software. So this isn't obviously just for Dataweave. Most of the modern internet is fundamentally based on a giant library of software that people have shared with one another openly. Now, what we're going to define that openly. So we have a way as a community, as a global community of humans, to share software with each other. We actually have a lot of ways. So I want to ask you a few questions and have you think about it. You can put it in the chat. So if you wanted to share your ideas, your code, your engineering product with other people, how are you going to do it? How do you share it with them? What does it take to share it with them? Anything, any code. Let's say you had a SQL statement that was a really useful query, or let's say you had a data model that was a good way to keep track of embeddings for an AI system or whatever. Like you had some cool thing, right? We could share it as an API, right? That's a big thing in the MuleSoft world is we like to share via APIs, right? So that's one way to share software. Now, when you share an API with people, it costs you something, doesn't it? Right? If I wanted to share my code with you through an API and you use my code, I got to pay for running that computer, right? Whether it's a cloud or whether it's my own on-prem or whatever, I got to run that. Like it's a runnable, it's reusable at runtime, right? So open source software takes advantage of the fact that software is free to copy, right? So I can share code with you and not have to operate the code myself. You could operate it, right? So if I want to share code with you that you operate, well, how could I do that? I guess I could email it to you, right? I could put it on a website. That's probably what we usually do, right? But many of your companies don't do that, right? Many of your companies, you write. I was just, I was just talking to somebody at, oh man, who was it? On the MuleSoft community. I think it was in Technical Questions Slack. So if you become a member of the MuleSoft Mentor Program, there's this Slack community where you can talk to other MuleSoft people. There's a bunch of them, actually. If you go hunting, you will find all kinds of ways to work together with other MuleSoft people. He made a way to load TLS context from HashiCorp Vault. Now, if you don't know what that is, it doesn't matter because we're just talking about innovation and engineering. Anyway, it's not something that MuleSoft can do out of the box. And he did it for his big giant client in India. It was in India. Now I remember who it was. He's going to be in my architect meetup. And he can't open source it. He can't share it with me because his client paid him to build it, right? So one of the things that gets in the way is intellectual property agreements, right? So if I build you a piece of software and you pay me to do it, you may not be okay with me sharing that with everybody else. So that's one thing that gets in the way. Can you think of anything else that gets in the way of sharing your work with other people? Intellectual property is one thing. What else?
Well, it's kind of responsibility, right?
Responsibility?
Well, I'm not sure how to frame it, right? But if you share a piece of code, hopefully you're responsible for it.
Well, yeah. One other thing that gets in the way is it's like I have to take care of it. If you have a bug, you might ask me to fix it, right? or
Yeah.
it might not be very useful if I don't, right? So part of it is the responsibility of maintenance and upgrades and enhancements. You have to decide who's going to do that. So wouldn't it be nice if you could help me enhance and upgrade and fix bugs, right? So that's another nice feature of sharing code with each other is we can work together on it. There's another issue with that. It's just like liability, right? If I write some code and you use it and it burns your house down, I mean, I live in the USA. I know we've got a few Europeans in here, but at least here we've got some unfortunate bad habits in our legal community of suing each other for stupid things. Right? Maybe the other side wouldn't think it was stupid, but there is the issue of warranty and liability, right? Not to mention the fact that you might not trust me. What if I put like a backdoor in my code so it can get into your system, right? You might want to be concerned about that too, right? So this whole thing about sharing code we have to trust each other somehow. Yeah. So open source software is like decades old. And it has to do with the way we share software with each other. And the agreements and the trust of how we can safely and reliably have code from one another. And there's not just one way to do it, right? So we have to do, that's what I was trying to get at with these bullets. We have to have some choices we make about what we do want to share with each other. So what I'm okay with you doing with my code. Some people may not want you to make money. Like if I built code and gave it to you for free, maybe I don't want you to make money on it. Maybe I don't care. Maybe I do care, right? Maybe I don't want you to put your brand name on it and sell it to other people, right? Maybe I want you to say that you got it from me. They call that attribution. So what you want others to do with your code is something that you can include with it as an agreement. It's like, hey, we put that in the licenses. I'm going to go through some licenses in a minute. So, hey, if you use my code, this is what's okay with me, right? Also, this is what's not okay with me. So Apple has this license they use that says their code cannot be used for nuclear facilities. That's what Apple says. For some reason, they're happy to share their code for all kinds of different people, except for the ones operating nuclear facilities. Okay, fine. That's what Apple says. I mean, they wrote the code. They can make the rules they want to make, right? So the way we capture those agreements is in these open source licenses. And this is not a legal advice, but there's generally 3 categories of open source licenses you could choose from. And my recommendation is not that I choose for you. I mean, if you're going to write some open source code, like I did in Dataweave, you go decide what you want other people to do with it, right? So since it's code, opensource.org is a useful place to go kind of look at your choices. GitHub helps you kind of navigate it when you create a project too. They give you kind of an easy wizard, but you got to go read what the different licenses mean on opensource.org. Opensource.org is a website run by the Open Source Initiative, which originally started by Eric S. Raymond to make sense of all these different licenses. So let's kind of go through the categories and you'll see why we needed to do that. Originally, there's this idea of public domain, and this comes down to the basis for these agreements comes down to this notion we came up with in our governments called copyright, where if I author something, many governments offer copyright protection where I can sue you if you publish my work. So maybe I made up a song, Happy Birthday, right? And you sing it at a party and you charge somebody $10. I could sue you maybe for that. So that's kind of the basis of copyright law is there's a protection for the author of a work to say how it gets used. And so public domain is where anybody can use the work for whatever they want. And there are very minimal licenses where you can just write some code and say, here you go. Anybody can use it for whatever. And that's kind of what public domain is the most permissive because you're releasing ownership. It comes down to ownership of the intellectual property. If you publish something as public domain, you are relinquishing off ownership of that work, right? So if I write code and I say it's public domain, it's not my code anymore, right? That's one big difference with public domain. So if you do retain ownership, you can still allow people to use it in various ways. So there are a whole category of open source licenses like MIT license, BSD license. So when you make a library, you got to pick one of these. And that just says use it for whatever you want, but I'm not going to warranty any. I'm not going to be liable if it breaks, if it burns your house down, or whatever, right? Maybe some permissive licenses have some requirements, like you got to tell people I wrote it. If you make any enhancements, you got to retain part of the license. So permissive licenses generally let people do whatever they want with it, including make money. Yeah. So there are another more restrictive set of open source licenses that sometimes are called copyleft instead of copyright. It's kind of a pun, or reciprocal licenses. And these are licenses that require you, if you use the code, to also include the same license on your code that uses it in some various amounts of degrees. So the Free Software Foundation and Richard Stallman originally created the GNU public license, which is GPL. Linux uses that license, so you probably heard of it that way. So if you use software, if you reuse some software that has a GPL or some other reciprocal license, you are supposed to put your source code, make your source code also available. And there's a lawsuit going on with, I think, LG right now, where they used GPL code and somebody sued them, and they were supposed to release their source code. And I think that case, it was a case law thing. I'm not a lawyer, so, but I think they lost the case. So it's been tested in court now. So that's the kind of different categories of license. You're going to pick one of these licenses using opensource.org. You can also share other creative works with the same kind of agreements. And so Creative Commons is a place you can go if you wanted to share, I don't know, a poem or documentation or a picture that you painted or something with the world. You can license it to other people for them to use in a limited way, kind of with the same ideas as open source software. That's called Creative Commons. We don't need that for today. We're going to use open source licenses. So I'm going to tell you a story of how I did it. So if you've got your phone, you can take a picture of that QR code. If you're on your computer, which most of you probably are, you can just go to GitHub. My name is R. Haig. Here, you can find me on GitHub. Actually, this is github.com/Haig/Dataweave. So the website that's in the QR code is also in the chat. So I open sourced some Dataweave. Because I was looking around and there's not much. Most of the reusable Dataweave that's out there is published by MuleSoft in the central Anypoint Exchange repository. So here's what happened. So every year in December, there's this competition. It's Advent of Code. And I have fun doing coding challenges. And Alex Martinez and I both have been doing some. So you'll see some of hers on Twitch with Advent of Code. So in 2022, I started doing some of the challenges in Dataweave. And now in 23, I decided to try to do all of them in Dataweave. So there's like 50 or 49 challenges every December. Well, some of these challenges require algorithms that are not in the Dataweave core libraries. So I made one called a priority queue. It's a very interesting talk, but it's not this talk. You can use it to do things like generate mazes and find shortest path and stuff like that. It's a cool algorithm, and efficiently. Anyway, I was unable to solve some of the Advent of Code challenges in any kind of reasonable time with Dataweave because I didn't have a priority queue. So I made one, and I went and looked up, and it took me probably 5 times as long as I planned. It was a lot of work to make it because I had to go find an algorithm that was going to be an efficient priority queue in functional programming. Anyway, that's all written up in the README. And by the time I got a working priority queue, I said, maybe other people want to do Advent of Code challenges and they don't want to write a priority queue from scratch. Why don't I share this as an open source library? Okay, so I was going to go on GitHub and share it as an open source library. First thing I found out, of course, is that I can't just publish it in Anypoint Exchange, right? Dataweave is on the MuleSoft stack, it's also on top of the Java ecosystem, right? So Java ecosystem uses Maven to share. So I needed to do something with GitHub and Apache Maven to share the library. Luckily, I happen to have come from a Java background and I knew how to publish stuff in Maven Central, and we'll talk a minute about what Maven Central is. So I went through all the stuff to figure out how to get the Dataweave priority queue that I made out in Maven Central so that you don't have to clone it and publish it into your own Anypoint Exchange. You can just add a dependency and there it is in your project. So Maven Central is hosted by this company called Sonatype, which is the one that they are the ones who manage and host Maven Central, kind of as just like a free gift to the world. Sonatype is a cool company because they just do this for us, and we all take advantage all the time of Maven Central. And there's this one company out there doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. Sonatype was started by Jason Van Zyl and some other people, and he was one of the original authors of Maven way back in like 2001. So that's like 23 years ago now. But he, that's part of maybe why it makes sense that Sonatype happened that way. Anyway, they are the publishers of Maven Central. So we're going to go see how you could do that. If you made something and there's a lot of things that need to be made in Dataweave. I'll give you some ideas in case some of you want to try it. Things that you could do, really. So if I go, oops, that's tunnel vision. If I go to the Dataweave documentation, just look at the core library of Dataweave. And I go, for example, this is something I was trying to do with a friend a couple weeks ago. You go to the crypto. Like, let's say I wanted to encrypt or decrypt with Blowfish or with RSA or some normal encryption algorithm. It's not there. So somebody could make an open source encryption decryption function, right? That's needed. Or another one I was looking at is I was in here looking at some of the math functions, and there is a very short and small library of mathematical functions in Dataweave Core. So if you want to do anything statistical, like median or 99th percentile, you got to code that yourself. So that's another nice candidate for Dataweave function. So you can make open source things that are missing from the standard library. Part of the reason Java became so popular and the basis for all this software in the world, including Mule, is because people saw missing things in the standard library and they released it open source. There was a guy, some of you may have heard of him, named Ross Mason, who saw that something was missing from Java, which was a way to do it. Originally, it was VM queues and connectors. He wanted to make plugins and VM queues and thread pools that move data from place to place. And he made this open source thing called Mule, right? So open source is the reason we have Mule in the first place, right? If you go in GitHub and you go to the contributors page of Mule, look who the top contributor is. Ross Mason, right? He was the guy who made it. Now, of course, he finished his coding a few years ago now, but he still has the most commits, even now after all these years in the open source core of Mule. Even though there's MuleSoft, even though customers pay so much for the Anypoint platform and all that, the core Mule kernel is still this open source library built on top of Java, right? So this is where all the good stuff in software comes from. So you can participate, and it's probably a good idea if you do participate. So I've learned a lot of really good things in my over the years trying to participate in other people's open source projects, and now it's time. We can make our own open source projects. So this is it. This is the one. This is the priority queue I made. There's some things I did. So part of what I want the story to do is it's not that I did it the only way you can do it. There's a lot of ways you can do open source software. So I just did one way. I'm going to go through all the steps so you see what I did. And then if you do something different, great. Part of it is innovation. So first thing I did is I put the library in a public repository on GitHub so everybody can get the source code, right? And I identified a license I wanted to use, like the Apache 2.0 license, and I actually read it. It's not that long, right? And I looked at the bottom, and there's like this little appendix. How do you apply the Apache license to your work? And it tells you, attach the following boilerplate notice with these fields replaced in your code. So if we go back and look at my code, we'll just take, for example, did I do the POM file? I hope I did. I didn't do the POM file. Let me do the actual Dataweave code though. Source, main data. Here's my priority queue. Here, I attached it. A little comment at the top of my file. Copyright me. License. This is what they told me to fill in, and this makes this file subject to the license, so that other people can use it according to the terms of that license. Right. So that's one of the things you do is what I did was I read the license and I did what it said, applied that to all my files in my project. Next thing you can see I did is I thought about, if I'm going to share this code with people, they got to know how to use it and what it is. So I actually wrote a README, and I kind of thought about, if someone's going to use it, how do I use things? I go to the page and I just look, how do I set it up and use it? I just want this basic instructions. So right at the top, I put installation instructions, right? Here's 2 ways to install it, Maven or Private Exchange. And then here's how you use it in your code. You do an import and then the steps to actually use it. And then I didn't want to stop just with using it. I put a little bit of credit to the people whose work I used, because these people wrote some really good papers. And there's, if anybody is going to enhance this with me, then they should see the algorithms behind it. And then I put a little contributing thing, because I do want other people to submit to it. I want part of open source is we work together and we can share, enhancements. So if one of you finds a bug, there's an enhancement that I didn't do in this optimal, purely functional private queues. There's one enhancement that's still left to be implemented. If somebody wanted to implement it, they could give a pull request, right? So that's what I did. I made a README, and then now you can at least find and read the code. You still can't use it in your project exactly. I mean, I guess you can if you do this, but for this to work, I actually had to have the code exist in Maven Central. So how does it get there? Let's go see what Maven Central is. repo1.maven.org. This is Maven Central. Whenever you build something with Maven, this is where the repository that it goes and finds it in. So my code is in, oops, that's not my code. That's Ross's code. That's everyone's code. Software.heg group ID, Datawave PQ, artifact ID, and this version 0.1.0. So let's go see in Maven Central. Software is the directory, and then there's me, Heg, and then there's Datawave PQ, and there's a version number 0.1.0, and there it is. So that when Maven resolves it, it's going to go find it here. Well, if you're going to do it, you got to be able to put your own code here on the same website. So you're not in charge of the website. So there has to be some way to publish stuff into Maven Central. And of course there is, because look how much software is in there. Like, there's obviously a way to put stuff in there, right? So how do you put stuff in Maven Central? Let's go see. The main thing, Maven Central, which is managed by Sonatype, is going through a big upgrade. So over the many years, I have had an account at this website, oss.sonatype.org, and it's using this underlying product, Nexus Repository Manager. That's how Sonatype makes money, is they sell Nexus to organizations, including MuleSoft. MuleSoft is a Sonatype customer. So you guys use the MuleSoft Nexus whenever you build stuff with Mule software. So you can be responsible for projects here inside Maven Central. So com.conflux. When I started doing Mule in 2012, I met the guys who ran the first MuleSoft partner. Their name was Conflux, and I ended up getting a job with them. And so I made their Maven Central repository, and there's some, if you go back and look, you'll see some old history of Mule in there. Conflux is no more. I still own the project, but it's gone. I also did a testing thing called Sham Software. So you can see a few older repositories that I'm responsible for here in oss.sonatype.org, including software.heg, which is where Dataweave PQ is. So if you want to publish something into Maven Central, you have to get a login to this website. But actually, it's not this website. This is the old one. So I only can log in here because I have had an account for a very long time. They're moving me off. They're kicking everybody off this server onto a new server, which is s01.oss.sonatype.org. So if you're going to publish something in Maven Central now, and you want to be responsible for a group ID, you sign up for an account here. And there's a whole README. So I'm telling you something that you can just go read in the public doc. It's not a secret. They try to make everybody know about it by having documentation. So you just follow that, and then anybody in the world can publish software in Maven Central by getting an account here on s01.oss.sonatype.org. So I just started a new organization this last summer called Anypoint Cloud, because I want to make open source connectors for Mule with other people. And so now I have the repo, and I can publish stuff in Maven Central. So this is the new place that you would go if you want to publish your own things. Now, teams can share these. So if anything got big, if let's say Anypoint Cloud got really successful, like org.apache, I could have other people also have publish permission into Anypoint Cloud. So that's how you get stuff into Maven Central. So that's almost the whole picture. Now, of course, it's the mechanism part. So I've got the code in GitHub. I've got the ownership of the central repository in Sonatype. Now I got to get the code in there. I got to actually do the build and deploy part, right? That's where Maven comes in. And it isn't the simplest thing ever, especially because a lot of these Dataweave tools are not, they're very new. So they're not perfect yet. So let's go through what I had to do for that. So I have the project open here. This is a Dataweave library project. There's a Visual Studio Code extension for editing them. It's pretty good. It says in the extensions module of Visual Studio Code, it's labeled a beta, but it sure doesn't seem much like a beta. It seems pretty good. I'm endorsing it. I like the Dataweave Visual Studio Code extension. So you create a project here, and it's organized like a Maven project, and there's a source main DW folder, and you put your DWL files in the right directory so that they can be imported. So you organize it how you're going to organize it, and you put your unit tests. Yes, unit tests. Yes, Dataweave unit testing is awesome. I'll show you some of them. Look at that. It's great. That's also not this presentation, but that would be a good one. Dataweave unit testing. You can have automated unit tests and you can have manual tests in a mapping file. Those are both pretty useful ways to make sure that your library is, think about it, other people are going to use your library in their code. So you want to make sure that the experience of using your library makes sense to your users. That's why I had this mapping in here. So I made an example mapping with things that I needed to see if users could do and if the library worked. And I even used the timer library to see how long things take, because I wanted to see, how I was trying to do some basic performance profiling. So I did that here as well. That all is in the manual test. And then, of course, there's a unit test, and it's got my Apache license stuff up at the top. So so you make the library, and then your pump, you have to use the Maven tooling to create a releasable jar, sign it with your GPG key, and push it into Sonatype. Sonatype has rules that for cybersecurity, it's actually really powerful. It's really good rules to make sure that Trojan horses and viruses don't end up in Sonatype. And they do pretty well. But part of it is, in order for me to publish something into Maven Central, I have to sign it with my GPG key. And so that's part of this whole requirements of the POM. It's not all. You also have to have contact information for the developers. You have to have a POM that says what the license is. You'll find all this. You don't have to memorize it. When you try to publish, it'll reject and it'll tell you what rules failed. And then you got to go update so that you pass all the rules. This is where I spent a good extra 16 hours of that I didn't plan on, is getting all the rules to pass for publishing to Central. But anyway, I did. You get all this POM stuff in there. I want to show you some in particular stuff. I had to make a release profile. So there's really two ways with Maven to release something to a repository. One way is the automated, easy way, which didn't work for me, which is the Maven release plugin. So the Maven release plugin is designed to kind of orchestrate many other Maven plugins to create a release, tag your repository, sign the thing, and publish it and upload it, and all of the stuff that happens in a release process. And it's a two-stage thing: Maven release prepare, Maven release perform. It's supposed to work. And with most things, including Mule applications, it does work. The release plugin is what you would like to use if you could use it. However, the Dataweave plugin. So let me show you what Dataweave's build is based on a plugin. Where is the plugin section? Let me find my plugins. There's my plugins. There is a Dataweave Maven plugin. And it's using this version, Dataweave Maven plugin version, which if you go up and look, it's set to 0.3.4. MuleSoft is not saying this is 1.0 software. MuleSoft is being very open with the fact that this is unstable, pre-release, version 0. So I should have known, right? Anyway, I used it and I paid the consequences. It didn't work with the release plugin. There's a issue with this version of the Dataweave plugin. I hope it'll be fixed later. where the GPG cryptographic signature part doesn't create the right files to upload to Central. It doesn't have the right file names. So I had to do a manual thing. So really all the release plugin's doing is a series of manual Maven commands in order, right? It says do this Maven thing, this Maven 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're done, send it to Central. So I just did those instead. And the trick is with my version of the Mac, I think it's a Macintosh thing. The GPG plugin, the signature plugin, needed these extra settings, and I found them all on Stack Overflow. So part of what I'm trying to offer the community is not only this priority queue library, but a working example of how you publish something. You can go copy this out of my project and put it in your project, and then you can publish things and sign them properly for Maven Central. So this is all the stuff I figured out for the GPG plugin. It turns out that there is a goal for the GPG plugin. I think I have it here. Yeah, sign and deploy file. I got it out of my history, where it doesn't just sign it. It does kind of the whole finish. It finishes the process. So once I get my release all created, it goes ahead and signs it as well as uploading it to Maven Central all in one big step. So that's what I got to work finally. I did have to do a little hack. So I'm going to share it here because it's on a recording. Maybe somebody can rewind, and when you face the same problem, this is there. I hope I kept it up here. There is this weird thing with GPG where it needs a way for you to provide a passphrase for your key, and to get the Maven plugin to use it right, you have to add this loopback thing. So you put that in a little GPG executable. I'm going to put the link in the chat. If any of you are ever going to do this, hey, you came to the talk. I figured maybe you might be interested, but that's what it takes to get the GPG plugin to actually publish the Dataweave library itself. And I had to do that because the release plugin isn't working with the Dataweave libraries. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to do that at all. So once they fix the Dataweave Maven plugin, then this may not be necessary anymore, but it was necessary this time. So anyway, so we got over the problem and we were able to publish into Maven Central. I'd love to do a live release, but I don't have any changes. So here, I'm just going to kind of talk through what happens. Once I do this sign and deploy file, what's going to happen in oss.sonatype.org is there's this build promotion user interface on the left. And there's one of these called staging repositories. Looks like I got logged out. Let me get logged back in. There we go. So your staging repositories are anything that you have pushed into Central, but has not been approved yet by them and checked and sent out into the world. So it's like this staging step. So whenever I do a release of a Dataweave library or any other library into Maven Central, a new repository pops up here, and you can kind of see grayed out. There's a close button, a promote button, a release button. There's a workflow that you have to go through. And as soon as you're done pushing things into the repository, because it's kind of it could be a multi-step process. For Dataweave libraries, for me, it was a one-step process. But, I guess there's other types of artifacts that might be multi-step. Once you're done, you close the repository, and it goes through all these automatic checks, and you see them down here at the bottom. And it's this long list of things, and it takes a little while. It takes like 10 minutes. And it checks your code to make sure it has all the licenses and signatures and everything's good and ready for the public. And then once it's done, you can promote it and then release it. And then it goes into the queue to get put into Maven Central. I've seen delays as long as 36 hours in my experience, and as short as 45 minutes. So it takes a while to get it into Maven Central, but it could be pretty quick, 45 minutes when you release the staging repository. So that's really the main experience you go through to publish something into Maven Central is you have to go and log into this Sonatype screen and get it pushed. So I think that's the end of what it took to get it published. There's a little more fun in that in what you would use it for, but I just kind of hope. I guess I should put these badges on here too. I just kind of hope some of you do it and put it out there. In the process, I learned something. So I learned about GitHub badges. There's this whole tradition on GitHub of putting a badge that you're about your unit test status and your and any other badges to sort of indicate the quality of your project. So the fact that it's in Maven Central with a version, I was able to put a badge there with that. There's this, if I hit edit, you can kind of see there's this website called shields.io where you can have it generate you a badge. See, so that's where that came from. And it actually goes in Maven Central. Not me. I didn't tell it. It went in Maven Central and found out what the latest version was all by itself. And then the unit tests, that's done by GitHub Actions. So it's not that's not an external thing. That's a built into GitHub badge. So the badge just kind of indicate to people who come browse your project that your project is good enough for them to use. You know, hey, I did my unit tests. I've got it in Maven Central. Badge. Right. So I thought it's not something I knew about before I published this library. So, yeah, so that's the process. So once upon a time, I published a library. The end. I hope it was interesting. So I suppose before I go do the community thing, and I'm going to tell you guys all about the rest of the MuleSoft community and how you can get more involved. I'll be happy to take if anybody had. I have not been watching the chat. Any questions or comments or observations? If anybody's had similar experiences that they want to share.
First things first, I think, Ryan, this was just such great presentation about this. Like, there are some things that I didn't really know about, especially using Maven Central. The first question I have is, so I mean, obviously, Maven Central is a universal, thing. Everybody knows about it for the most part, but you're not publishing it in Exchange at all. Like, at what point would you?
You can. So here's how I handled that. Good question. I handled that like I don't have access to publish anything in MuleSoft's publishing exchange. Right? I don't work for MuleSoft. So the way I figured I would handle it is I gave credit where credit's due. If you want to put it in your own exchange, I was going to write instructions, but Alex already made a really good blog about it. So I just figured I would link to her blog and say, here's how you because you have to modify the source code. If you want to put it in Exchange, the group ID has to become private to your organization.
Right.
So forking it, probably the way I would do it is fork it and publish it to your own exchange. In order to get it into Central MuleSoft Exchange, I think there's like an ISV agreement I got to sign or something like. I haven't learned how to do that yet, how to get something into Mules. But there are definitely libraries in MuleSoft Exchange that are Dataweave libraries. There's a JWT library. There's a mock data library. So it would be cool if we could put other open source libraries in there. I just don't know the process. So, yeah, if anybody knows how we could put our own open source libraries here in MuleSoft Exchange, that would be awesome.
Yeah, because that was what I thought. I haven't done any deep dive into the Dataweave publishing this, so that was what I thought. I thought there was a way to do this to the central, publish that to the central.
There probably, I bet there is, and I just don't know it. I would love to know it. If anybody else here know, do you know how you get stuff in MuleSoft Exchange? I suppose I can pull the chat over to the other screen so I don't get tunnel vision. Oh, that's a good idea, Francis. Like a neat library to make would be cleaning out, right? Because LLMs just generate blah, right? So you could take it down to like some clean text or something like that. That's a good idea.
Well, I guess they will ask you kind of to indeed sign some papers, right? Because like probably it's like with connectors, right? There are several levels, and like there are community connectors, but if you want to be a little bit of selected, right, then you have to be responsible for it, and like it has to be reliable.
Yeah.
I have another question though. So I first wanted, like, since I haven't written many tests with Dataweave, I just looked through the code, I think I understood how it works with the plugin, right? So everything is triggered through the Dataweave plugin, and then unit tests are run. But my question would be: so I've never written open source software myself. So like, thanks a lot for the presentation. I learned lots of stuff. Like, how would I do this if I needed to?
Mhm.
But my question is, wouldn't you, or like, probably I would kind of put more information into README for everybody who wants to contribute. Like, how do they have to, what do they have to do with the test? Like, what are my expectations of the quality of contributions? Like I'm just not sure how to do it, so I'm asking.
Exactly. Yeah. So if somebody didn't have that, then they it might even make them less interested in helping because they don't know what it's expected. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're
So
right.
I'm
Yeah.
saying, like, let's say I would like to contribute. Maybe I would like to improve something or add something, right? And then I'm writing, and maybe it's breaking everything. But I'm like, if I'm a good developer, probably, right, I would figure it out myself and would write and improve tests. But if I'm not, then maybe there should be some expectations, like say, okay, you can do a pull request, but only if everything is green or something like
That's
this.
a
Or
good
is it
point.
kind of a common sense that you don't need to write it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, and a lot of projects they have a very like a whole separate file. Like let's see about Mule for example. MuleSoft has one like a contributing file, like with
Yeah,
all of
I was just considering. So like
the.
you're releasing an open source software, and there is like a piece functionality which is like core to you, right? It has to work with probably some SLAs, and then you have to protect it with all you can, right?
Yeah, so yeah, add more complete documentation for contributors. So I'm going to add an issue to the library. Not, I mean, your point is good for everybody who's doing it. That it would be helpful if everyone did that, but I think it would probably be good for me to have an issue here, so I do it. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good observation.
Yeah.
Because then they know how to help and how to run the tests and yeah, and what tests are expected.
Exactly. So that's exactly the question I asked myself. So if I would like to contribute, like, what's the kind of minimum expected
Mhm.
from such a contribution?
My first contribution ever was Apache had this thing called Jakarta. It might still exist. This was like 2002 or '01, and the HTTP client didn't do chunking right in the HTTP 1.1 spec. And I talked to him on the mailing list, and I was a beginner developer. I figured out though how to fix the bug, and I just sent them the Java patch because back then it wasn't Git. You had to send patch files, and of course it got completely rejected angrily, like like you're saying, they wanted unit tests. I'm like, unit tests, what's that? And I had to go research that, and like, it probably took me like 5 or 6 tries to get my patch to get applied. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Having that instructions would make it a lot more likely for someone to successfully change it without breaking everything and to meet the coding standards. And I did a one-liner. No, now we've got an open issue. Thanks for that. What else? What else you guys
Yeah,
observe or
sure.
notice? Hmm?
Hey Ryan, I have a question here. This is Tomasz. Yeah, first observation, it's an amazing demo. Thank you so much. The one thing is that we are actually also planning to build some libraries in the organization I work for, shareable libraries,
Mhm.
and that's been something I've been looking into for a while, but now it becomes more like, especially Alex Martinez blog that shows how to do it step by step. It was really helpful. I was able to go through it. So that's pretty amazing. What is disappointing though, because we actually migrated a lot, just recently migrated a lot of Mule 3 to Mule 4. In Mule 3, there was lots of Dataweave functions that we had to build like custom functions, right? And now as we migrate to Mule 4, it turns out Mule 4 has a lot of functions already built in, which is great because we don't have to carry those over. We can just use the ones that are Mule 4. And that kind of reduces my scope of creating custom libraries, right? Because
Yeah.
Mule 4 has really a lot of good package of of Mule4 libraries, but there is still few, right? So I think that's going to be great to leverage this and being able to share instead of duplicating code in every single integration.
Yeah, and there's plenty of things that I don't think they're going to add to the standard library because no, they don't think it's for everybody. Yeah, like a priority queue is never going to come. They were never going to
True.
Yeah. So I did it. Yeah. So, but you found a bunch. You already had a bunch of libraries. It sounds like for Mule
So
3.
we have a lot of like in Mule3 malfunctions, right? And so because at the time we developed Mule3, there was no really a good way, I think, to push library into Exchange. Now I know it's possible. However, we also realized that while migrating to Mule4, most of those old Mel libraries or functions are no longer needed because they're already in Mule4, right? Like,
oh man,
I'm
I don't
not
meet
sure,
too many people who know about Mule expression language. That's cool.
Well, I'm not too proud of knowing this as well.
No, it's a feather in your cap. Mel was an interesting language. It wasn't a bad language either. It was just very terse. It was very short to say things. They had what they call comprehensions, right? Yeah, that's not in Dataweave. Comprehensions aren't in Dataweave, so it's a different type of language. But yeah, so you don't have to rewrite all those mel functions because you're finding them in here, huh?
Yeah, which is great, right? But I still like the idea of creating short library because I'm pretty sure there will be something that is not there in Mule4.
Yeah, and it might not be this. Like, not all of them need to be open source. I just did a NetSuite project with a client who it made sense to make a library for some basic NetSuite XML stuff, and I don't know if it was just for their use case. I don't know if we would ever share that as open source. So some things are probably more publicly useful than other things. But yeah, I'm finding some things missing, mostly because Advent of Code is a algorithmic challenge. So a lot of stuff is like for computation, and it's not there. So yeah.
And another observation is that I really like how the framework of the library has already all the unit testing, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's better. It's like they're already, yeah, it's really good, the unit testing. I just I was doing some research, so I'm teaching an MUnit class. I did this morning, and we're doing Dataweave assertions. I just found these assertions, the same assertion library where it has must and equal to and all that. You can get that in MUnit also with the assert expression thing. So all of this, not the whole thing, not the whole file, but all of these assertions, those can be accessed in MUnit too. So that's pretty cool.
Excellent. And thank you so much. And one last question I have. The only thing I'm not clear about, what's really is the difference between the unit testing and the mapping files? Like, what is the difference between one and another?
Oh, the mapping files don't assert anything.
Okay.
These are just used for preview, kind of like transform message component. Why didn't I hit the button? Why didn't it come up? Yeah, my demo is not going very well right now, but but really, it's just a way to see live. I wonder where it went. Show open, enable preview editors. This worked last time I opened it. So anyway, it's meant just for a live
demo
preview and for visual inspection.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, like the Dataweave Playground, and I don't know why. I was just complimenting this, and it didn't work this time. But yeah, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. Bye, Ramesh. Francis mentioned, has anybody used the mock data generator library? Because it doesn't do weighting, and I also like Markov chains. Francis is talking about randomizers that are statistical, so you'll get Francis's name more often than my name because my last name is rare, So, looks like my preview finally worked. There we go. That was just a slow one. I think it's because I have a performance test in here. But yeah, I haven't used it yet. I'm interested. I don't know if anyone else put in the chat.
Yeah, same here. It could be extended for doing things like anonymizing data when you're moving from production to test instances, that sort of thing.
Oh, that's a useful feature. Yeah. So I have it downloaded here. I got it. I pulled it from Exchange. I have it on my desktop. The reason I got it was I just wanted to see the code. So the Dataweave mock library is right here. I just wanted to look at it, and see how they did it. And it's got these data sets in there, and there's the data generators.dwl. Let me open that up. So it's interesting. I like to see as much professional Dataweave from the authors as I can. They know what they're doing with Dataweave. So here it is. And it's got this nice Dataweave documentation too, right? Where they generated all the docs. It's a random age. So yeah, I learned things that way. Well, all right. Let me get this. Let me do the proper meetup wrap up. This has been brought to you by the MuleSoft community, which I am a big fan of. You can get involved in other meetups and do your own presentations for these meetups and volunteer. I'm sure Winnipeg would love to have you to do a talk. Right, Mana? Scan that QR code to get more involved. And otherwise, Max and all the rest of the Salesforce plushies, thank you for. Oh, and Einstein, here he is. Thank you and the big Einstein for your for coming and being part of these talks. This is how I get better, by putting all this together and having to present it to other people. I've learned a bunch of things by just needing to do a talk for a meetup. So I encourage you, if you're feeling like interested in something, even if you don't feel like an expert, in the process of doing a talk, you kind of become good at it. So sometimes just throw your hat over the wall and, put your name out there to do a talk, and you're going to learn something. So I encourage you to do that too.